Oh, here comes
Village issued necklace.
photo op.
Is it a
Don't
quick
go
photo
too
op?
far.
Let's take a picture then.
With or without the hat?
Without the hat.
Very nice.
Always great.
Yeah, exactly. That one was the blue one.
And the plaque. Oh, the plaque. Get the...
We should have the next one. We can hold up the.
All right, one without it.
I took two.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Take your plaque with you. Don't forget to...
Can I just say a few words?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Board of Trustees, this is indeed an honor and a pleasure. They say good things are worth waiting for. This is a very good thing. Although I relocated with Lynn back to my home community of Yonkers, which we lovingly refer to as Rivertown South, nevertheless, our heart is still here. Our family is here, Karen Greenberg, boys, Justin and Joshua, son Andrew, his friend Ariel Gama, graduates of the Irvington school system. Some of the best friends forever are people who they grew up with here in the village. And it was an honor and a pleasure to serve this community for the years I did. I love working with the board, I love working with the police department. And most of all, I did whatever I could, as best I could, to make sure that our community was a community that was intended to be, dispensing justice at all times, but always remembering what our special little village is, and protecting our kids, most importantly. So, again, it's a thrill to be here. Thank you so much. We got better late than never. And I really appreciate all of your efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I would love to just say, in addition to what Mayor Smith has said so well, of course, was a little older than Mayor Smith at the beginning of your service here, Judge Ecker, but as a wonderful family and a great community individual, I saw that for many years, and I greatly appreciate what you have done to make the quaint small town even quainter and more of a lovely place to live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again, and thank you all. You voted with your feet to come back, so we're happy to have you guys and the next generation as well. So congratulations to all of you.
Here, right?
Congratulations, guys.
Thank
Thank you.
And sorry it took so long.
He's got a few other
Yes.
hack rat things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
You might have other boxes. I don't have any right now.
Certified?
Sure is.
Certified. Yes, exactly.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All the best.
Congrats. Thank you. Thank you. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Judge? Your Honor, good to see you. Bye, Karen. Bye, guys.
And it's never better to follow a long-term service award than with a brief overview of the school budget. So we've, I think this is the fourth year, or?
Sixth.
Oh, really?
Sixth year, who's counting?
Yeah, exactly. Wow, okay, so this is the sixth year that we've had you in to
Yes.
give a brief overview. One of your whistle-stop tours on the budget.
Yes.
So there's two other presentations as well?
Well, we've had numerous. You're actually the last before the all-important day, which is next Tuesday, which is Election Day, where the community will have an opportunity to cast their vote on the proposed school budget, and also to cast votes for 2 seats on the Board of Education. So I would like to, of course, begin by thanking the mayor and the board for the time this evening. And just as we are hearing the words of the judge and talking about community and all the work that he did and the relationships and the experiences that his children had, our goal is to have a budget that continues to provide for that sort of experience across the board. And as we went into the budget process this year, we stopped to think about our vision, as we always do. And in doing so, we wanted to make sure that we're reflecting on those big picture goals that are important to everybody here in Irvington, whether you have children in the schools today, you did in the past, or you may in the future. But we want to make sure that we're supporting each student's academic and social and emotional growth. We want to make sure that we do so in facilities that our community is not only proud of, but ones that certainly support our students' learning. We want to make sure that we're committed to our professionals, to those folks that are so important in providing education to our children. But then when we have to do so, we always have to think about finances and recognizing how large a sum of money the school district budget is. And in doing so, we're committed to delivering budgets that are compliant with our tax cap, and recognizing that from time to time, we have to step back and we have to make large-scale improvements to our facilities, and we do so through capital bonds. But when we can, we always try to make sure that they're cost neutral. So we spend time, the administration and the board, planning them to ensure that when there is debt that's expiring is when we contemplate these new bonds for improvements to the facilities. But we know from time to time that we face challenges, but we try to control these expenses. We try to plan for tomorrow, and a part of that formula is maintaining strong reserves, which you'll see a commitment to starting to build even greater in this budget. We have a strategic plan, as most organizations do, and in doing so, we have 6 objectives that underpin all that we do in our schools. And if you were to go back and watch our presentations through this winter and spring, you'll find that we linked all that we did in this budget back to these strategic objectives to make sure that all of our thinking and our spending is aligned to what our objectives as an organization are. In doing so, as the mayor referenced, we've had quite a process thus far. We start internally back in November and December by assessing what our needs are in the school district. And then in January and February, the state starts to release budget-related data that informs a public process. And you can see a number of presentations that the administration gave and dialogue that the community and board was able to participate in, which brings us to where we are today in preparing for the budget vote on the 15th. There's a number of resources available on the district website, and anyone with questions certainly can take a look. I left in the back of the room copies of our recent budget newsletter and this evening's presentation. In sum, when we look at our actual budget that's going before the voters next week, it is a budget of just over $61 million, which represents a 3.8% increase. And even though that number is bigger than 2%, I want to reiterate that point that it is compliant with the tax cap, and I'll demonstrate how momentarily. When we look at our tax rate, it's currently estimated at $19.41 per thousand of assessed value, which is a 1.42% increase. And we have some modest initiatives included within this budget, with a big focus towards safety and security in our schools. The considerations are before you, and these are the items that, as you can imagine, we started off with a much longer list, but items that we see as critical to support the needs from an operational perspective and a program perspective in our school district. When we look to the left, it's what we do to keep our schools going. I referenced security before. Well, there's a couple figures here related to security. One is architect fees, and working with our architects to be able to support some improvements in our schools. We have $86,000 worth of new spending associated with security initiatives for a total sum of $122,000 in this budget. And this budget also adds another roving security guard, but we're doing so by finding efficiencies within our budget and not adding new costs to the community. I referenced earlier beginning to save for tomorrow. In the school district, just as the village does, we face a lot of challenges with tax certs. And when different entities go forward and when there are appeals, we have to provide refunds, of course. Many may not know that the 119 corridor, all those office parks and the hotels and the Stop and Shop that you see are within the school district boundaries. So when they appeal their taxes and there's a refund to be given, the district has to bear the brunt of that, unfortunately. The district for many decades has had a pattern and a history of financing those refunds. We have a modest reserve account that we utilize for that purpose, but we want to start to budget monies for that each and every year, and I would like to see that figure begin to increase. When we think about the student-facing side of the budget, we know that STEM education, so that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is critical to our students' future. With this addition of one teacher here, we're actually now able to offer our students a K-12 continuum of STEM learning. We're adding a guidance counselor at the elementary schools to be able to support our students' social emotional needs. I do want to just put a little footnote here that this is, while very important, and something that we believe in as a school district. It is also a state of New York mandate that is not funded, so we're not receiving additional aid to be able to support this requirement. And then we're looking at some additional athletic coaches, again, through the lens of safety and security. These were positions that were cut numerous years ago. Creating a new special class for students with special needs. And then, of course, with everything, there's benefits associated with that. It's a very conservative budget. As I did through the budget process, we cautioned the Board of Education that we're not forecasting increases in special education, unknown tax certs that will be coming up, and any emergent facility needs. If we do happen to see great increases in these areas, we'll have to pivot and make adjustments within our existing budget to satisfy those challenges. As referenced before, the budget aligns in numerous ways to our strategic vision that I referenced before. And I just briefly to provide an overview of the tax levy cap. Again, this is a compliant budget. When we look at the tax cap, there's two key factors that work into that. One is the assessed growth factor, which is actually the growth of the tax base in our community, which is a positive number. And then, of course, CPI, which, of course, relates to inflation. We anticipate that we'll see growth in both of those fronts for the coming years, which means opportunities for the district to be able to maintain its existing programs. An overview of our revenues for this school year, and again, they're all projected because New York State, the federal government, like to make adjustments on us at last minute. You can see the increases in variance in our property taxes directly associated with the tax cap, some increases in state aid. And you can see an asterisk because that number, as I said, is always in flux. And then we have other figures that come into the budget, such as tuition and some revenues that come from rental with outside organizations that use our facilities. An overview of the budget expenditures category by category. And schools are a people business. So when we step back, it shouldn't be a surprise that 73% of our budget is directly tied to human resources. And you'll see some bumps here and there, debt service going down, which is a good thing, of course, but then also looking at some big increases in transportation, and that's truly market driven. We went out for a bid this year and numbers came back much higher than we had seen in previous years. Just a graphic overview of looking at the budget, and it really jumps out to you when you think of the cost of people in the schools. Our expenditures, which you can imagine, line directly up with our revenues. And a simple way for our community members to calculate their taxes. There's also a calculator on our website that will do this for you, but simply plug in the numbers and you can see what your estimated taxes should be for next year. An overview of budget trends for the school district. If we look back and think before 2011-12, I've been in the district since 12-13. We were just starting to come out of the financial crisis at that point in time, and there were significant cuts for many, many years. And if we were to roll back the hands of time and go back and look 10 years before that, we would have seen increases in school budget of 6, 7, 8%. The financial crisis, the tax cap, changed the way funding is handled and how budgeting is done in schools. And we'll see certainly more modest increases moving forward because of those things. When we get down to the bottom and looking at 17-18 in contrast 18-19, we can once again start to compare increases because of the reassessment. We can't look back beyond 1 year at this point in time because of how the valuations were handled. The one reminder that I always like to give members of the community that a school district really has two shots at the budget. Next week, the 15th, is the first and hopefully the only vote. And It requires a simple majority, but if by chance a district was not to receive, and then I'll say the hypothetical district was not to receive support on election day, they would have the opportunity to put a similar budget back up or make modifications. If a budget was to be defeated on a second pass, you would have to implement a contingency budget, and in doing so, there would be huge limitations. We wouldn't be able to see much growth at all. Under law, we'd only be able to increase our budget $24,000, which would really be doomsday scenario for the experiences that our children in Irvington enjoy. We'd have to make cuts of approximately $2.2 million, and those impacts would be felt not only by the children in our school, but by those other organizations that use our facilities, because we'd be limited in allowing outside groups to use our schools. So we hope we never ever come to this point, but it's always a good reminder of the importance of folks coming to the polls on Election Day. That said, just kind of a summary of where we've been, and with an overview of the many presentations that the mayor referenced before. And of course, if there's any questions, you can check out our resource pool on the district website. And then, of course, you can always email budget at Irvington Schools. It comes directly to me, our assistant superintendent for business, and we'll be sure to answer any questions that the community may have.
Very good. Thank you. And I guess also I'll mention, unrelated to the budget, but related to next Tuesday, is the candidates forum is actually going on simultaneous to our meeting, unfortunately. But
Correct.
It's going to be videotaped, and it's going to be on YouTube, I understand. So
Yes.
if you want to see the debate, you're not missing it by being here. You just can't see it live. So
Yeah, that is correct.
well, we appreciate you, coming out, just for the sixth time, giving us a personal overview of the budget. I think the more information we can get out there and get people to participate in the vote, the better it is. So we appreciate it.
Great. Thank you all, and thank you all for your support that's ongoing and an important part of the school success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now for some announcements. First, the Village of Irvington Historic District Design Guide, which we spent a lot of time on and have presented here multiple times, is up for an award from the Westchester Municipal Planning Federation. So that's very exciting to all the hard work there. So I'm very proud of them. That they get the award on June 7th, actually.
It's the third award for that document.
Face 2018 Spring Fest will be in Madison Park on Saturday, May 19th. So that's, I think it starts at 2 o'clock or so, give or take, around 2 o'clock. But we can make additional announcements and confirm the time. But it's always a fun day. There's 5 local bands playing, and there's a bunch of things for the kids as well. Memorial Day ceremonies will be on Memorial Day, which is Monday, May 28th, starting at 10:45 a.m. At the renovated Main Street Memorials. This year there'll also be a rededication of Memorial Plaza, since we had all that work done. So it's kind of an exciting year for Memorial Day, even though it's a solemn day, of course. The 3rd annual Student PSA Video Contest. The deadline for submissions is June 10th. Details at the Slow Down Irvington page on Facebook. Did you want to say something about that, Mark?
Traffic Committee is organizing this again. For the first 2 years, we had some great submissions. There are cash prizes for all of you that have plans for the summertime. And the details, as Brian said, are on the Slow Down Irvington Facebook page, or will be tomorrow morning after I upload them. And I think it's going to be, it should be interesting. This year's theme, we always have a pedestrian safety theme, and so this year's theme for the public service announcement is to focus, ask the kids to focus on state law, stop for pedestrians in crosswalks. Thank you.
Very good. Celebrate Irvington is coming up on Saturday, June 23rd. Do you want to give away any surprises yet, Connie?
A lot of secrets, but I would give the information that community groups are, as always, encouraged to come be part of this, nursery schools, nonprofit groups, to be on the street, on Main Street that day. So if you are a community group out there or here, or just a parent group, a neighborhood group. Nick Campbell is the Chamber of Commerce president now in town, and he would like to know if anyone wishes to participate in that way. It's a matter of just putting up a table, but being part of the day. And we can put this on the website, but info@rivertownschamber.com. info@rivertownschamber.com is a way of communicating to Nick Campbell about your desire to participate, or even other questions that you have. But we'll hold all the other surprises for some other
Well,
meeting.
I'd like to just say one thing is, the mayor has agreed to be the presenter of the awards for the video festival at noon on that Sunday.
Yes.
So-
One of many things the mayor may be doing that day.
It's fun day.
Yeah,
So
okay.
hopefully you can make it, we have good weather. Moving on to checks over $25,000, there was one, which was for Mid-Atlantic products for Main Street tree grates, just under $40,000, $39,767, which came out of the capital fund. This is the actual hardware, Larry, for the tree grates, the tree grate project that we're going to start on Main Street. I had two others that weren't on the agenda. One, I just wanted to acknowledge the heroism and bravery of police officer Angela Libertor. I'm sure many of you heard, it was all over the news, but one of our police officers who was off duty at the time in the park with his wife and two children heard screams. He ran towards the screams, which I think that was my favorite part of all his quotes. He heard screaming and he ran towards it. When he got there was a 5-year-old girl who was being attacked by turned out to be rabid coyote. He immediately jumped in. He tried to, I think it's another great quote, he tried to choke the life out of the coyote, and he held it down until the police arrived. Obviously, he was also bitten, so he had to receive rabies shots, but I think, again, we all like to think we do things like that, but, and the mom had tried to kick it many, many times, and it did nothing, so he fell back on his, she said, his jujitsu training. He's just like a quote machine, that guy, but it was, well above and beyond the call of duty. I think anyone who's, if he had tried to kick it and called the police and waited, I don't think anyone would have said anything, but he went above and beyond, so I just wanted to personally acknowledge him today and say what a great job he did. And then just the last announcement was a reminder, as Superintendent Chris Harrison said, the Board of Ed vote, which there's 3 people running for 2 slots, and the budget vote for the school district budget is next Tuesday, the 15th. And that's all I have. Anyone else have any announcements? Okay, so on to correspondence. There's a theme of some of these. We actually had a couple others. A quick reminder on the policy: in order to appear on the agenda, we have to get them by, I think it's 11 o'clock or noon on Friday. By noon on Friday. It's just really a timing issue. If you send them in after that, it's not, we don't just throw them out or ignore them. They just don't show up on the agenda, but they're in the official record. So we have a couple here about composting. I think we had a third one that came in a little later as well.
No,
maybe not. Nope, it's only the 2 that we had early. Nope, there's 3.
There's 3, yeah, the first 3.
First one's from Susie Fromer. Brandon put in my plea to the Village of Irvington to provide carting of compost scraps from the Irvington Farmers Market to N3 Veterans Park. Truly amazed at the success of the efforts of Ann Jaffe Holmes and Altman and Leola Speck in starting the program here in Irvington, and I've seen them tirelessly promoting the program, collecting scraps in our bi-weekly winter farmers markets all season long, and I carted them to ours on behalf of everyone participating in the program. That's actually from Susie Fromer, who is the local coordinator for the Irvington Farmers Market. So I think we call her the head of the farmers market, but she's in support of the village doing something like that. Amy Ziff, who's also on the farmers market team, would like to urge the village to assist in the meaningful effort to get more people in Irvington to compost. Compost is one way to cut down the community costs for trash. And then Beth Cropper is also in favor of the proposal to provide assistance to the farmers market to help cart food scraps to the farmers market collection site. For those of you that don't know, the town of Greenburgh set up a composting site for food scraps, and there's one site currently in Greenburgh, which is over in Veteran Macy Park in Ardsley. It's obviously not easy to get to, so if you're everyone driving there with a small amount of scraps, it's not exactly very environmentally friendly. So some folks at the farmer's market, led by Ann Jaffe Holmes, said, you know what, I'm at the farmer's market. If people want to bring it to me, I'll put it together. I think she thought she'd get, 10, 12 pounds or something, and she could bring it over on Tuesday or whenever she wanted. Turns out they got hundreds and hundreds of pounds. And she doesn't want it sitting in the trunk of her car until Tuesday. So we are going to look at seeing if we can, how much it would cost to have a program. So we're working on that now with the DPW and other folks to see, come back with an estimate of cost.
Yeah, just one comment about, this has been one of the initial focuses of the reconstituted Green Policy Task Force, GPTF, but specifically also that we should probably look into what Hastings is doing, because they're doing something where they're having, that's with their DPW, and they have like a couple sets of containers. They lead one and then take the other, if you know what I mean, like alternate back and forth in cooperation with Greenberg's DPW at the Veterans Park. So there's some things that could actually make it go faster, for smoother, that we could learn from them.
Okay.
Very good.
Next, I have correspondence from the residents of Hillside Terrace. Did you want to say something to that rather than have you read the letter, or?
I don't know how this.
Whatever's easier for you. Again, if you'd rather, say something in the next session's public comment, or I can read the letter, it's up to you.
I think that's easier.
Okay.
I brought copies for everybody. Do you have copies?
I think we all got copies of it, yes. This petition from the residents of Hillside Terrace concerning the Village of Irvington Ordinance 213, Section 10D, regarding street parking between the hours of 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. respectively, request that the Board of Trustees take action at its May 7th meeting to enact an exemption from this ordinance, which serves no public community purpose on our street, was never enacted or was arbitrarily enforced on seldom occasions in the past, and presents an unnecessary daily burden from the petitioners with no coherent basis. In recent week, petitioners who require street parking based on the structure of their property have been ticketed, and there have been calls to the police department each and every night to ask for courtesy permission to park in the street in front of their house. Tried and tested, this protocol defies common sense. While recognizing the importance of emergency vehicle access, Hillside Terrace is wide enough to accommodate not only fire trucks, ambulances, and other emergency vehicles, but also large sanitation trucks, tow trucks, landscape trailers, UPS, FedEx, etc. There is no discernible public interest that is compromised by street parking between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. There's virtually no movement at all on Hillside Terrace between those hours. And then it's signed by, I guess it's almost everyone on Hillside Terrace that was available.
I got an updated one, which is hold that one. So do you want me to give you the?
That'd be great. Yeah, you can actually give it to Brenda as the clerk. But we will.
There's one missing. Just think of that.
Big component of no parking.
So Brian, I was thinking about this, and one question I had was, this that you supposedly need to
So
call
this
up.
is everybody here who lives here
Every resident in our block, every household,
on the
even
Those who
they
did.
live in San Francisco.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
That's
Maybe
all right.
have the last one,
Yeah,
right?
we'll make
Perfect.
copies
That's
of
what I'm
it.
going to share.
Okay.
So yeah, we're going to talk to those attorney about it and we'll figure out a plan and get back to you guys.
Okay.
And then the last bits of correspondence are about the proposed parking area on South Buckout. Beth Proper, who can't attend because she's actually running for school board, she's at the candidates panel as we speak. She's sending this email to register an objection to rezoning sought for the purpose of the parking lot on South Buckout Street. Those planning board has recommended against the project. Local residents who live in the area directly impacted by the project object to this project. I, as an Irvington resident familiar with the area, object to the project because it will adversely impact the community aesthetically, environmentally, in terms of safety. I'm particularly galling to be faced with another example of private developers with deep pockets being permitted to have multiple opportunities to profit from changes that would adversely affect a substantial local group of opposed individual property owners. Developers like this just see their endless resubmissions of denied applications over the course of time as a cost of doing business. Meanwhile, private residents suffer the temporal and financial cost of being ever vigilant against the continuous repetitive attempts of commercial interests to get project approved without regard for the best interest of the community. That's Beth Proper, Circle Drive. Actually, Jessica Munzel was about the compost collection at the farmer's market. So I will just say that Jessica Munzel is in favor of us collecting compost and bring it over for it. This is from Ryan Tunstall. Please see the attached for a letter addressing the ongoing new concerns related to the proposed Astrobuck parking lot. Understanding the complexity of the issue, a difficult balance must be struck between those who already have and those who plan on investing in this community. However, I believe that the residents of this neighborhood have been clear with our concerns and objections to this proposal. I hope you take my neighbors' comments and concerns into consideration when governing wisely. Ask this letter be entered in the record in your next public meeting. As owner of 8 Maple Street, I believe the proposed rezoning and subsequent construction of a 49-car surface parking lot will negatively affect my property and the investment I have made in the community. The applicant continues to submit plans to make minor modifications but ultimately do not address the fundamental concerns that have been repeatedly expressed by the community. I therefore ask the Board of Trustees denies the applicant's request to rezone the site. Over the past year, the opening and use of the Hudson Loss has created noise nuisance I believe is in direct violation of the local urban code. Noise, especially deep bass from events held inside the Hudson Loft, emancipates out of the surrounding neighborhood sometimes until after 11 p.m. Previously, events has increased and is now approximately 2 times a week. I've called the Irvington Police on a few occasions to complain about noise levels, but it seems that little has been done to enforce the issue. Elimination of the wooded area to create a surface parking lot will only exacerbate the noise issue. Therefore, I'm strongly against proposed parking lot proposal, especially given the increased use of Hudson Loft space. Furthermore, I make the following request and suggestion. I request the board and village enforce the sound ordinance bylaws in the village code. The police should be given direction and authority to intervene and require event organizers to follow the village code, prohibit noise levels after designated hours, and keep noise at reasonable levels during permitted times. I believe that there are different DJs, live bands, and event organizers being used for various events who are not aware of this ongoing nuisance. Volume levels are set forth by each user, and therefore the burden of policing the noise level falls onto adjacent homeowners and the residents for each incident. Therefore, suggest that the village board require the owner-operator of Hudson Loft to install noise monitoring equipment inside and outside of the event space to help establish and enforce the appropriate noise level. I believe this would benefit us all as the equipment can measure and help establish the maximum decibel level that does not create a nuisance to surrounding residents. Thanks for your consideration. Respectfully, Ryan Tunstall. So that was kind of parking and noise. That was all I have for correspondence, and we'll move on to public comment. Please check.
Good evening, Mayor, Janice, Connie, Larry, Mark. My comments tonight are a follow-up to the letter I sent you. Some of you, or maybe none of you, have seen it, but I'll be brief. My comments regard the shooting range up around the reservoir. So I live on Lewis Road, not far from the reservoir and shooting range. I have an office in my house. We go Friday, there was extended loud shooting for roughly around 4 hours, maybe more. Very loud and disturbing to my work. I called in a complaint to the police department, and the response I got was, well, they're in training. Next couple of days, I visited neighbors around the reservoir. We spoke. They sent me some emails, and I understand now that this is an ongoing problem that's been brought to the board's attention. I did some research. The site where the shooting range site is, it's zoned for IF40 residential. Per the Irvington's Chapter 24 zoning code, Article 4, there's no allowed use in the code allowing a shooting range in the residential area, in the area zoned for residential. I also did some research with regard to noise. The code specifically prohibits the honking of noise of horns, the playing of radios, musical instruments, even yelling and shouting that are a level that disturbs the peace for neighbors. It also calls out penalties ranging from $50 to $250 per violation. In my opinion, the shooting, which sounded like a war zone, far exceeded any of the cited prohibitions in the code. I tried to determine when the shooting range came into being. I found no documents stating that on the village website. Maybe the range came into being when there was relatively low population, maybe not. I find unusual there's no structure to mitigate noise at the range, given that it's in a residential area. Years ago, when I was a young lad, a family member took me to the shooting range in Ardsley that recently closed. And that range had or has an enclosure to attenuate the sound. There's no such structure at the range in Irvington. So I did find a note on the website. December 1946, the Irvington Police Revolver Club invited board members to a turkey shoot in the basement of St. Barnabas Church. So, some questions that I have. Is there a permit for the shooting range, a special permit? Are any actions underway to mitigate the noise? Has the village paid any penalties to itself?
I think I'll just cut you off there. We actually don't have to, like, as the village, we don't have to follow those laws. There's also a law that says you can't discharge a firearm in the village, but obviously that doesn't apply, to us. So I think that's the short answer for those questions. I did see your email late this afternoon. And one of the other questions was, is it open to the public? The answer is no. Do other police departments use it? It's a little more complicated answer. It's probably about 90% used by the Irvington Police. The other 10% is Greenberg SWAT team, which we are a member of. So some of our officers are part of the SWAT team, so they do train there. Was it fall, Larry? We had the complaints. The chief had allowed some other departments to shoot there, which we've gotten rid of that practice because of the complaints. So now it's just Irvington or Town of Greenberg. Why do we have it there? It might be your bigger question. Ever since 9/11, the federal government's taken back a lot of the shooting facilities. Camp Smith is one of the main ones that was used by law enforcement, and that is now only federal, so that really hurt. The Westchester County does have a range. Westchester County Police Department does have an indoor range. It's actually very nice. Unfortunately, for us to use it, we have to pay the county for a use fee. We have to pay for overtime for county police officers to go there, and then even harder for us is we have to schedule overtime, officers to come in overtime. So we estimate it to be about $50,000 a year in overtime costs and associated fees to not use our range anymore. I have spoken to the chief about looking at putting up some kind of burns or sound, some kind of, even something to deaden some of the sound. So I think that's the other question you had. So that is in the process. How much that's going to cost, we don't know, but we're looking into that as well. And what we know, as far as we know, it goes back as far as at least 35 years, because that's when the chief got here and was already in practice then. So it's been there a long time, as you say. I think what raised people's, what made it more prominent was when the chief opened it up to other departments, because there's only about 3 ranges in all of Westchester County: Yonkers PD, Rye PD, and Westchester County PD. And then if you don't use those, you have to go to private ranges, which obviously costs a lot more. So that's the big issue, is there's this real lack of range space for law enforcement in Westchester County.
Okay, so are you saying that the village can operate outside the law, outside its own code?
Yes, I am.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So I know this isn't the forum to get into more detailed discussion about this. Do you expect that, my letter will be on next week's agenda for a more extended conversation, or?
We can have it on the agenda. I can follow up with the chief, but it's not something I know. We don't have enough information to know how much it's going to cost to put in sound buffer and things like that. So we did a bunch of research on this. It's just, I typically I'm not able to answer letters on the fly, but we looked into this quite a bit. The end of last year. So we have been looking into it, and we actually reduced the range usage quite a bit. Again, bringing it only in-house and Town of Greenberg. So I can definitely let you know what we find out about how much it's going to cost. To me, I'd like to put in some enhancements to the range as well. It just comes down to a dollars and cents issue, I'm sure.
Okay, well, I think it's unfair that, the neighbors around the reservoir bear the brunt of this very, very loud noise, despite what it may cost the village. It's in the code, it's in the law, and it seems like the village should follow the law.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
Just we don't have a lot of options, that's the problem. Any other public comments? Please.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I am an Irvington resident, but more importantly, I'm a mother concerned about the ongoing effects of climate change. I recently joined a local Mothers Out Front team, a grassroots organization with the mission of ensuring a livable climate for all children. I joined this organization based on my strong feelings that we can work at the local and individual level to make a difference, that sitting idly reading about environmental changes was not an option anymore. I'm encouraged by Irvington's Environmental Action Plan, its desire to study and transition to more energy-efficient town vehicles, its strategies for dealing with severe storms and other impacts of climate change, and its goals of lowering its village buildings' emissions and energy consumption. And of course, the efforts in composting that were mentioned earlier. I applaud its recent streetlight conversion to LEDs and participation in the community choice aggregation using 100% renewable energy. I'd like to propose an additional goal. In honor of Mother's Day, at the behest of our group, as stated in our Mother's Day card, which I'll pass out shortly, I propose a resolution committing the village to do everything in its power to reduce carbon emissions within its borders and become a community powered by 100% locally generated renewable electricity by the year 2030. Recognizing that climate change is happening now, that action at the federal level has stalled, and that we have little time left to preserve a stable climate for our children, we know that action at the local level needs to accelerate. This can include solar panels and wind energy. I know that this goal is attainable. I previously taught French at an elementary school in Norwich, Vermont, that earned an Energy Star, the symbol awarded to energy-efficient products and buildings due to its use of solar panels, which generated more power than the school consumed. This significantly defrayed energy costs and worked favorably towards the school's budget. This showed how environmental consciousness and cost savings can be twin simultaneous goals. Greatly appreciate your time.
You should never give us your name.
Katie Hyams, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, could you spell your last name?
Hyams.
It's my first Mother's Day card, thank you. Do you have public comment? Another chance at the end. Next, I will move on to the consent agenda. Do you have any questions about this? I think the only thing I'll point out is nice to see Greg Allen was actually, he passed his test and he's officially appointed now, provisionarily anyway.
Right. I
Otherwise,
was going
I'll-
to mention that. I'm glad you did.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do I get a second? All in favor? Next is the presentation of parking and traffic information by Astor Buck LLC, proposed parking lot adjacent to 50 South Buckout Street. This goes back months. We basically had said the biggest issue, the biggest reason why we consider a change in zoning was to, to address the problem that had been brought to our attention, which was, the overflow from the success of Astor Buck into the local neighborhood was causing traffic parking issues. So we wanted to see what those traffic and parking issues were, in a study. So we asked the applicant to perform that study, and that's what we're getting presented here tonight. Anything else to add, Larry?
Sounds good to me.
I'm just getting ready for the stormwater report.
Is it the PDF that's here?
Yes.
No, I wish that was. It's not. All right, let's see here.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. Andrew Tung from Dignity Schwalbe, here tonight with Bill Thompson from Astor Buck and John Canning. We're here to review the parking and traffic report, as the mayor mentioned, that has been prepared, actually updated on the behest of the board, and also to talk a little bit about this proposal in the context of the work that the village is ongoing, or the ongoing work regarding the comprehensive plan. So John will begin. John is from Kimley Horn, and and traffic analysis. They'll also talk a little bit about vehicular circulation in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Andy. Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Mayor. For the record, my name is John Canning. I work for Kinley Horn. I'm a licensed engineer, licensed to practice in the state of New York. We conducted a traffic and parking study for the proposed 49-unit parking lot that is proposed to be developed on the south side of the Trent Building and on the west side of South Buckout Street. It was a traffic and parking study. We did surveys of all documented parking and parking spaces on the roadways within 700 feet or a 3-minute walk of the building. The area is outlined in yellow there. Page. It's basically the entire Metro North lot on the east side of the tracks. It's South Astor Street, including the parking in front of the library. It's South Buckout Street, basically from Main Street down to the crosswalk in front of the Half Moon Apartments. And 700 feet from the building also extends up onto Maple Street and halfway down Willow Street, as well as on Station Road where there is no parking. We prepared our study and submitted it to you. It's dated March 28th, I believe. This is a summary of one of the tables in there. It documents basically how much parking demand there was at various locations, what the parking inventory is, and the available spaces. Listed here are the spaces that would be suitable for parking by employees and tenants of 50 South Buckout Street. There were a total of 223 spaces on street that would be suitable for parking by the building on the neighboring streets, 18 of which are on Willow and Maple. And of these 223 spaces, 196 vehicles were observed to be parked, leaving only 28 spaces unoccupied. This was on, I think, January 6th. 11 of those spaces were on Willow and Maple, so only 14 spaces were available on South Astor and South Buckout. We also did a survey of the employees, asked them how they got to the building, where they parked. On a positive note, 38% of those who came to the building did not drive. They took a limo, a train, a carpool, walked, which is a positive development. But of those who did drive, 47% parked on the street, or approximately 60 people. So we have some photographs which basically show this is the north end of the MTA lot, which is pretty much fully parked. South end, all the way down to the south end, where there is some metered spaces. They were also fully parked. If you look up, next one, Andy, thank you. This is looking up South Buckout towards Main Street. Again, it's very dense parking. And this is looking back in the opposite direction in front of the building, looking south on South Buckout. Thank you, Andy. And then from the other end of the building looking north, you can see parking in front of the building and on the ramps. And then looking south on South Buckout towards the crosswalk on in front of Half Moon. Thank you. So parking is, so intense that some motorists are choosing to park where they really shouldn't. And the goal and the objective of the applicant is to provide more convenient parking for his tenants and employees, to relieve the parking, the neighboring streets, which would also relieve parking pressure on the downtown because the pressure pushes up towards Main Street. And if you can go to the next slide. This slide basically shows the parking lot, which would be nestled south of the Trent Building and east of the Hudson Building. I would note that right now, in the morning, many employees and tenants who arrive come down Station Road or come down South Buckout. They go into the driveway that's on the south side of the building, and when they can't find parking, they come out on South Astor, and then they proceed either up South Buckout or down South Buckout to look for parking, or sometimes over onto Maple. So with the addition of these parking spaces, there would be less parking further away from the building, and there would be fewer vehicles that would circulate around through the two busiest intersections of the area. Our traffic analysis was conservative in that it assumed there would be some increase associated with the new parking spaces, but in reality, parking doesn't generate a program, and the building is the size that it is. Even with this assumption, our analysis indicate that the two intersections, that's Station Road at South Buckout Street and South Astor Street at South Buckout Street, have more than adequate capacity to accommodate future traffic volumes. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and Andy has a little bit to talk about the comprehensive plan as well.
John, did you take into account at all the effect on traffic of loading and unloading of trucks at the docks?
We did, to the extent that when we did our traffic counts at the peak hours, we documented whether there was loading or unloading, and at those times there was non-unloading. So if there was loading at that time, we would have documented it and taken it into account.
And I understand that you did this on one single day.
Correct.
Is that something that could become a statistically valid argument?
Industry standard is to base it on one day. There typically are variations, but they're usually not that significant. We make sure we count when school is in session, that it's not a holiday, that it's not pouring rain or snow.
John, I think I'd say that I was a little surprised by how many spaces were actually still available. Were you surprised at all by the number of available spaces, or is that kind of what you expected, or is that typical?
Not really, because we try and set the study limits so that we can push out to the extent of where the parking demand is. And so most of the spaces obviously closest to the building are occupied, but as you get further and further down, you do get one or two spaces. As I indicated, if you were to go down, if you discount the ADA spaces, because you're not allowed to park in them unless you can, or the 15-minute or spaces in front of the library, there were only 14 spaces on South Astor and South Buckout that were free, 14 out of something like 200, which is not, in my mind, it's not a lot.
But John, sorry, the other thing that relates to that is the numbers you show that at peak time, there are empty spaces on the main lot, on the main building lot. So it means that there are, the numbers don't show that the parking isn't totally utilized in
Well, what that shows basically is that it's a permitted lot, and so when you come in the morning, people park, and then if you leave in the middle of the day, your space is empty, and if somebody doesn't come, everybody else who's arrived before you left is parked out on the street. So there's 60 people parked out on the street. There may be 6 spaces in the middle of the day that are vacant on the lot. So the bottom line is if the village decides to approve this application, the vehicles that are parking on the street up and down South Buckout will be reduced by 44 vehicles.
So can you remind us one more time about what was done to calculate the needs for a fully rented building? The parking needs for,
Right.
Based on, I think there's only a small percentage of space on that rate.
Correct. So I think we increased the existing parking demand and the existing traffic by, I'm going to say 6%. Let me see if I can find it here quickly. Which was based on the unoccupied space that was provided to us, the information that was provided to us by the applicant. %, not 6%. The traffic by 4% based on the occupancy, or the lack of the unoccupied space.
Right, and what's the percent? Remember what the percentage of unoccupied spaces?
It would have been 4%.
Or you just did a 1.1%?
Right.
And the other thing was, you might have said this, I was off cogitating about something else, but where does when there are peak volumes of traffic at different times, and when obviously there's certain bottlenecks where there's queuing delays and people all have experienced, such as the Station Road Tunnel.
Yep.
But where does what percentage of traffic would be coming into the existing parking lot area or the proposed area from each of, there's basically 3 ways to get there, right? There's
Correct. Station Road, South Buck out from the
South
south,
Buck out,
and
or
South Buck
maybe-
out from the and come back.
I don't think you'll be getting that much, well, maybe to avoid the narrow South Buck out block there, but, so, it's either coming down Main Street, it's coming down Station Road, or it's coming down West Clinton, effectively,
Yep.
to get into that area. So did you have a profile? I know you did, but could you remind me of that? A profile of what percentage of traffic it was estimated from coming in those different directions?
Sure. Give me a moment. So it's probably like 40% coming on Station Road and probably 45%, and with a very small proportion coming up from South Clinton.
Now, when you were looking at, so I'm just trying to get a sense of things, because I know you were looking at queuing at 2 intersections, the Astor South Buckout and the South Buckout Station Road, right?
Correct.
And the kinds of places. So what about the net impact on, in terms of traffic? Did we get any sense of what's happening in terms of, okay, 45% is coming along South Buckout, but it's all going up Main Street or coming down Main Street at rush hour in both cases. So, there's other large traffic sources that are feeding in at the same time.
So the busiest hour for the subject property happened to be from 10:45. Actually, it was 11:45 to 12:45. 38 vehicles went into or out of the current parking lot. There were obviously more generated by the project, but we can't track all of the vehicles and determine who's going to the building and who's not. So that was 38 from 11:45 to 12:45. There were only 18 from 7:45 to 8:45, which is kind of the peak rush hour time for the train. There were 34, which is slightly less than 38, from 8:45 to 9:45, which is the peak hour for the building in the morning when people are going to work. And in the evening, we concluded our survey at 5:45 because we figured after that most people were gone. And there were 29 motorists who left the building. And
So you're talking
4:45.
left the side exit on South Astor, effectively, that's
Correct.
what you were counting.
Yes.
And the other 2 counts of incoming, they were done at the intersections?
No, we counted the driveways. So the 29 was going in at South Astor, but in the evening there were only a couple of cars going in. Say 27 of the 29 were coming out.
John, I don't know if this question might be more for Bill. You were talking about how many permits are given to the existing parking around the building. And I noted that you give a significant number of permits in it over and above the number of spaces in the area surrounding the building. But in the Hudson Gray building that had 22 spaces, you only gave, I think, 22 permits. And I noted in the parking that was very underutilized. I know that the Hudson Gray on the surface, on the train side, is fully parked, but the indoor area seemed to be spaces out of only 44 total.
That's
available.
dedicated parking for Eileen Fisher.
Dedicated parking.
And I think there's 24 parking spaces inside the building, and there's 20 outside.
Right.
Right.
Right. So my question was why there were only 20.
Well, because Eileen Fisher gets
Right.
dedicated
Okay.
parking.
That's the answer.
They had a light day.
I'm sorry?
They had a light day.
I didn't quite understand the answer, about the...
Did you understand the
Yeah, I think I
question?
understood the question, about the Hudson Gray building, that there are the 24 inside spots, but you said they were, quote, dedicated. What
So
does that mean?
you're familiar with the aircraft overbooking, airline overbooking phenomenon, right?
Yes.
So what Mr. Thompson does with his permits outside, he does the same thing with his permits. He has 60 spaces, he sells 90 permits on the premise that people won't show up, and so he can maximize the number of people that he has on his property and not on the street. So Eileen Fisher, I'm going to surmise, is a preferred tenant, and this is what they wanted. And in negotiating, they got a 1-for-1, so he didn't overbook them on the number of parking spaces inside the Hudson Gray building.
So,
So the-
inside the Hudson Gray building, in the chart that's on your page 6, Hudson Gray, it says parking demand 30, inventory 44, available spaces 14. Is that to say there are 14 spaces available on your survey day, and they are available because they're dedicated to specific?
So the people who would have
Tenants.
parked, yes, the people who would have parked in those spaces were
Just-
off doing something else that day.
And no one else could take them because they were dedicated?
Correct.
Okay, I get that. Thank you.
They're contractually, I don't have the right, the legal right to let anybody else park there.
Okay. Larry, did you have, were you finished with your question? Oh, okay. So, John, on the same chart on page 6, there's the South Buckout Street section. It says 6-hour parking, and your pictures we're looking at that too. Parking demand, 107, inventory, 122, 15 available spaces. 15 available 6-hour parking spaces on South Buckout Street. Is there information about how far they are or where they are? Were they concentrated close? or-
So it's 1,800 feet from Main Street down to the end of the survey area, which was the crosswalk in front of Half Moon.
Is it down South Buckout to, okay.
There's a crosswalk across the street, just halfway down the street. So 1,800 feet is over a third of a mile, I think.
So this is way before the garden apartments?
No, it's halfway down the garden apartments.
Really? Okay.
You can just see the first garden apartments on the top left there, 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings on the top.
Okay. Got it.
So there may have been 1 or 2 spaces right by the Trent building, but they're prime. So when somebody leaves, somebody else comes along pretty quickly. You then find, now there's a lot of pressure off of Main Street. There were very few parking spaces up on the top end of South Buckout. And then as you go down South Buckout, there were a couple of spaces, and down at the end there were a couple of spaces.
So the 15, when you say couple, there were eventually 15 spaces on South Buckout?
Correct.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
correct.
But most of them were further away?
Yes.
Just following up on Connie's point, I think what struck me most about this chart was that in virtually every instance there are available spaces. They may be further away, they may not be the most convenient, but I was surprised that in virtually every instance you found available spaces. It doesn't mean if you leave your space for lunch, it's going to still be there when you come back. If you happen to be trying to nose in when people are rushing for a particular train, that's going to make it more difficult. But I would take issue with the one slide where you said that the parking shortage causes people to park with it. No, it doesn't. It doesn't cause them to park there. People are running for the train, they're running late, they need to get someplace quick, they make a decision, there may be legal spots further away.
Well, they choose to park in those spots because they're more
Well,
convenient than parking further away. So, poor choice of words on my part.
But again, you have available spaces.
So,
virtually
yeah,
everywhere.
well, if there's 100 spaces, to make it simple, we're not going to count more than 100 parked cars. So the likelihood that we're going to count 100, everything is full, is pretty slim. It's kind of like a bell curve. And so you're always going to find a couple of spaces that are empty. So admittedly, there are 15 out of 120 6-hour spaces that were not occupied, but I think that demonstrates that it's a pretty heavily parked street.
I do think, to me, the genesis of kind of our interest in the project was the Spiral Park folks telling us that they were getting, having a lot of on-street parking. And I think that those streets, which are obviously further up and not as convenient, like Maple Street had,
6, I think, was it?
yeah, like 6 open out of 11.
Yep.
Willow Street, which is again further away, had 5 open out of 7. So I think that kind of jives with us not getting complaints recently about the parking on those streets. So I'm not sure if it was Mr. Buck kind of first got re-going and revamped everything after the Trent sale, that it caused a big increase in parking demand, and now they've kind of figured it out. That was the most surprising to me, was kind of the further out affected that kind of caused us to be very excited about this project didn't seem to be that heavily affected now. If that makes sense.
It does. I mean, from the perspective that when you can't find a space on the lot, your initial instinct is to go where you're pretty sure you're going to find a space pretty close, so you go down, buck out, and then all of a sudden you're halfway down the road.
Yeah.
And those who are a little more prescient will say, you know what, I know there's no parking, so a couple of people go over to Maple or Willow. But you're right, there certainly are available spaces over there.
John, in your business, is there a percentage of taken spaces that indicate an overusage? In other words, it looks like about 80 to 85% of the spaces are taken.
Yes.
And 15 to 20% of the spaces are open. And again, in your business, is that a number that indicates overuse, or?
Well, I would say taken on the whole, right, the whole study area, that we're at a level that is not problematic. We're probably pushing on the threshold of capacity, but it's not problematic. But it does extend, halfway down into a residential neighborhood, and it does put pressure on Main Street because up at the north end there's very, very little parking.
John, can I add one question back to page 6 again?
Yep.
Sorry. The bottom available spaces says 50, but if I'm looking down,
What page do you want, Mark?
6. But if I'm looking down the list of the parking areas, obviously some of these have got to be, for want of a better word, derated because they're not actually available for public parking. And I know you probably said that, so.
handicap, 15 minutes.
Well, handicap.
If you go to page 7,
Yeah, and I just.
that's a table that took out those spaces and
That's what I
said,
was going to ask, to remind me where that was.
Mr. Mayor,
27 as opposed to 50.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I had just a few comments on the comprehensive plan that might speak to your comment a moment ago, if I may. And I'll sit here just so I can turn the slides. So I happen to be looking through the update that was on the village website, and there are 7, Chapter 4 includes 7 different recommended goals and action items from the comprehensive plan. Number 6 out of that is alleviating parking issues in the downtown. So that's 6 out of 7. And the existing condition at the top of the page under that issue was stated as the downtown working group recognized that a creative approach was needed to find the balance between protecting parking for the residents of the area and meeting the need for commercial parking. So that was the existing condition that was identified. And there were 5 recommendations of the downtown working group that were concurred with by the comprehensive plan committee. The first 2 speak to specific areas in the downtown, but if you step back a little bit and look at the concept behind those 2, I think it can shed some light on this particular instance. So F1 was to consider better usage of the Aqueduct parking lot and the Broadway parking lot to ease parking congestion on Main Street. So these are 2 existing lots, and the hope was to find a better way to use those because of congestion in the area. The second, F2, is explore other opportunities to create additional parking. And then this speaks to the North Ferris lot and the feasibility of underground parking. But again, the idea of creating additional parking in a tight space where there's a balance to be struck between residents' needs and commercial needs so that both can can do well and flourish. I think that, to the question of, well, on a particular day, or on a particular time during that day, all the spaces were not full. I'm not sure that that's true. That's going to be true on any day, because as soon as somebody leaves the building, that space will be empty. If you count it, it won't be full. But I think the level of occupancy that John saw, especially on the residential streets, indicates that there is some pressure, some significant pressure from people in the building. And here, there's an opportunity. I know that there are a lot of issues that have been raised by residents, and we've been prepared to address those issues. But there's an opportunity to relieve some of the pressure in such a zone, in such an area that is being spoken to about the comprehensive plan, right at that juncture between the commercial uses and the residential neighborhood. And there is no more land available in these areas, and so to be able to take a piece of land that is undeveloped and has a certain vegetated character, but we believe has been designed in such a way to respect those concerns, and we're willing to continue with an environmental review that will show that or provide all the information in one place so that the village board can make a determination that this in fact allows the creation of that balance, or finds a way to make that balance by adding 44 spaces net to the area and removing the opportunity or removing the need for those 44 spaces to be on the street. So whether they're all on the street on a particular day or not, it's basically that need is now being funneled into the same driveway that they go today, except now they're going to be located on site. They won't be exiting the lot in the instances where it is full and driving on the streets to search for additional parking. So it just seemed interesting to us that it was very similar to the thoughts that the Downtown Working Group had been looking at in a different area of the village, but in a similar situation as we saw it.
Okay, thank you. Secretary, questions, comments?
So, I was gonna ask John, I think you said, see what you say. Is it your professional judgment that there's an adverse effect on the business, the commercial entity of that building, of the Astor Buck building? Is there an adverse effect on that business because of parking?
Well, I'm a traffic engineer and a parking engineer. So if you're asking me, does the owner of the building is he in an inferior position when negotiating for rent when he doesn't have enough parking? I'm not qualified to answer that, but perhaps the building owner is. That's the best I can do for you.
Okay. And I guess my only other comment is that, yes, our comprehensive plan, as you mentioned, the village knows that parking is an issue in the village, and that we have looked for years for a good balance between the needs of commercial businesses, of commercial enterprises and residential uses, and the customers that come to Main Street, and that has been a tremendous balancing act that we've tried to do for years, and it's something that we haven't solved, and we put it in our comprehensive plan because we want to keep working on it. So you're right to point that out. That is a concern, but translating it to this circumstance and trying to figure out how this particular plan solves the problem is the one that we're facing right now. Yeah.
Any other questions? Mark?
No, I mean, I honestly, I have to say that I'm still a little disquieted by some of the numbers coming out. It just seems, and I was going to say, some of the results look counterintuitive in terms of, volumes at certain times of the day, but it is what it is, and I don't know that traffic study is intuitive. So I just think that maybe none of us on the board have all the analytic background to be able to really hit at the details, but to say, are there some missing or misplaced assumptions that, from the village's perspective, do we need to do diligence to have, a traffic engineer just review the report and make sure that there's nothing obviously or subtly off on it?
And I think my answer to that is if we decide to move forward, we would definitely need to do.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting, just because, otherwise I feel like we weren't doing our...
Sure, I agree. I mean, I think that, to me, I actually expected this report to be in the problematic and not just pushing capacity stage. So I think I'm a little surprised that it's not in that problematic stage right now. And again, I think it's looking at, there's two pieces here, right? There's solving for a village issue of residents in Sparrow Park mostly that were complaining about. I think people on South Buck out near Half Moon are more used to having cars in and out of there quite a bit. I think what was new was Maple Street and that area having cars. But it seems from the study at least, and anecdotally, we haven't had any complaints that might not be a big issue. So that was, to me, that was the big village issue.
Well, with the restriping too, near the stop signs and blocking off certain areas in their driveways that were causing problems. So that was done after the...
Which might have even lost a few spots, so we have less spots, but it's still not an issue. So, that was the original big issue problem that we're trying to potentially solve with this. It's a different issue of, the tenants of the building not being able to park near the building. I get that, but that's not really a village issue. That's much more of a tenant issue. So that's a difference to me. Could you still make a case that that's beneficial somehow to the overall village? Probably can, but it wasn't the problem that I was solving for, looking to solve for at this time anyway. Just based on this, again, this is a couple days, but, I thought it was a kind of a chronic overcapacity issue in that case. So I was a little surprised by the results, to be honest. Without delving into it further and seeing if there's anything missing on the face of it.
Potentially an anomalous day, an anomalous period, whatever.
And I think in the middle of January will be different than in the middle of June, perhaps.
Well, for sure.
Yeah. But if I may, if this, I'll just take a few more minutes of your time.
Sure.
If this were to be a new building at this size, the parking requirements would typically be much larger than the parking supply that is there today. It's a building that was built a long time ago.
It was industrial as well.
Yeah, and it was industrial use. So I think what the owner is trying to do is both serves his interests with his tenants as well as respects the fact that he is in a bordering a residential neighborhood. One of the comments that I heard early on was a suggestion that parking be put underneath the building, and that would be great if we were starting at the beginning. It's for this particular building, it's not possible. But essentially, this lot, if it can be designed in such a way that it is not obtrusive to the neighborhood, is the same as parking underneath the building, because you're entering the lot in the same location that you would enter the lot for parking underneath the building.
Except for one major factor, the view shed is removed at that point.
Well,
whether you can argue all you want about the quality of the actual wooded lot, which has a lot of problematic trees in problematic condition, but it is green space. So and it actually has screening against and the apartment complex next to it, or the condo, whatever it is, that used to be in the powerhouse.
Yes, yes.
So you can't equate them as being, the same thing. The idea of going under the building was to protect the screening and view shed impacts. I mean, it's obviously,
yes,
at this point, on the level of absurdity, you're not going to jack the building up to do it. So. You know what I mean?
Yes, certainly there are different aspects to look at in the entire project, and that was one of the requests that we had. Were you to continue to entertain the proposal, we would ask that some of the studies that we've been doing with you over the past several months be packaged together as part of the secret process so that it can be examined all at the same time, and you could get a traffic engineer if that was appropriate, or other consultants to help the board in necessary to make a determination. I mean, that's basically what the applicant is seeking, to provide the board with all the information needed to make that determination, whichever way that may go. That's in your best.
So, you do have, I mean, this is kind of another one of those kinds of absurd ideas. You're already sinking the lot down 10 or 12 feet, right, from the grade. What about if that was, in fact, a covered lot? What Ellen was that there was a green space on top, made it plantable with landscape trees, shrubs, undulating earth, whatever, made it something that was more back to a natural condition, and the cars were basically, I mean, I understand you'd have to sink the cars down more, but you'd also have to put a lot more money into a roofing structure. But there's a solution where, in the end, the site might start to go back to its original condition of being a green buffer between the residential and the business usages.
That's certainly a possibility. You rarely get the same type of tree growth on a roof deck that you would on soil.
You can design for
You could, but it's
planting areas and.
That's one of the options that could be considered during the further review.
Yeah, I'm just saying that in a sense that's, if we're throwing out wild-ass ideas, excuse my characterization, I mean, I'd rather prefer, I think that's actually a more doable one than digging under the building. But anyways.
Right. Interesting. I'm gonna, again, I don't know if this is too easy or too obvious, but I'm looking at your page 7, with the 27 actual. I realize that on page 6, the available space is 50, includes some that really aren't usable. But your page 7, if I understand from John, 27 is the number that came up as available, and the current proposal is for 44 spaces?
Yes.
Right? So you take 27 from 44, and what do you get? 17 is what really needed, is a very small facility that might fit 17 cars. I'm just looking at those numbers.
Well, just to step back a little bit and to, I guess, think a little on what the mayor said about pressure on Maple and Willow. As someone who lives with no driveway, I think the residents on South Buckout at the north end, as well as in the apartments, if they don't have access to a driveway, they have considerations as to whether there's parking in front of their homes or not. And the number of 50 South Buckout employees or visitors who park on the street is approximately 60. So the 44 will take away 6 from the 60, leaving 16 still on the street. So the 17 is a slightly different number.
We're not challenging your numbers. I think it's a question of, is the disparity between the need and what's available so enormous? Because honestly, I was expected to say, whoa, of course we have to do this. We have no available parking. People are like parking on top of each other. Clearly, it's an issue. But it's an issue throughout the village. It's an issue, for the people who don't have driveways on Buckout Street. It's an issue for the people who are trying to get trains in the middle of the day. It's an issue that we need to look at village-wide. I'm not unsympathetic to the issue here, but this is one piece in a bigger, and nobody wants it on their street. That's the other bottom line. One of the samples of places we might be able to squeeze out a few more spots that was part of one of the initial discussions was up the street here, the lot past the school.
Yes.
Well, nobody wants it there either, and in fact, that's school property, so it's completely off the
I think it's
table.
also deed restricted.
I'm sorry?
It is, yes.
I believe it's deed restricted.
It is.
It's a good
But
example.
even though it was deed restricted, we still had people tell us not to do it.
Yeah, but I think the bottom line, Ms.
Well,
Overwood,
just
is...
let me finish.
Oh,
One
I'm
other thing I
sorry.
just wanted to say, the one place where there clearly is no room is Metro North parking. And I've done my little anecdotal drive arounds from time to time. Those spots are always full. So clearly then people who are parking to take Metro North, there are not enough meters. We can't solve that problem, we're not Metro North, but that clearly.
The waiting list is 185, because I know I signed up.
I'm sorry?
I'm on the waiting list, it's 185.
Yeah.
But for 35 spaces. How long?
So anyway,
So-
just what I was just suggesting is
So-
there's
so
a
I
lot
guess-
of parts here, and a lot, clearly we've heard, and I'm sure we're going to in just a few minutes, from residents of this neighborhood who are vehemently opposed to this, and this would also require a rezoning.
Yep.
This is a tough one.
So you're absolutely right. This is a difficult decision for this board. But you said it yourself, parking is an issue, and this is an opportunity in this area to address it, should you so choose. And the is that the applicant currently has 35 permits for Metro North, and there's a waiting list for Metro North, so there's no guarantee that he's always going to have 35 permits. In fact, he had 25 more that he lost. So this would be sort of a bet against the future also, as well as addressing the issue.
No, I hear that, and also if this lot was built, it would not be a village expense, I get that too.
Yeah.
So, but it's complicated.
Okay. And I think too, there's a lot of information here. There's a lot to think about. You know, I don't think we're gonna make it up or down, you know, vote tonight. You know, we need to talk about this some more. You know, so I think that's.
Oh, I thought you were just tossing a coin.
That's happened here before. You know.
That's right, we know.
But yeah, so I think, you know, I think there's still much more to digest on this before we just decide that you wouldn't have to do anything further or to look at the information further, like Mark suggested.
Yeah.
That's how this, you know, so if somebody knows anything else, it's kind of how we're here tonight.
Thank you for your
Yeah.
time.
Thank you. And anyone who wants to comment on this, we can just wait till, you know, it's really not a great spot to do it. But if you keep your comments to only new information based on tonight's
Yes.
parking study, then I'll let you speak now. How's that? So we can, I know you guys want to hear the stormwater report, which is really good. But who would like to speak first? Please.
Sure. So you guys have seen us. We've been here now coming for years. This is what we've been saying the whole time. We don't have a parking problem on our street, as you can see. There's more and more people showing up to these meetings from our neighborhood. I think they can also attest that we don't have a parking problem on our street, yet for some reason Astorbuck continues to use that to try to justify the creation of this parking lot. And then their own report shows that there's no parking problem on our street. There's multiple spots. There's spots that they have on their own lot that they've now explained that they've dedicated to one of their tenants, but they're not really using them. And for some reason, it's our responsibility now to destroy our neighborhood, to help them. Their tenants have empty spots in their lot. And if you look at this page, the one that they handed out, it says right here, they're asking for a parking permit to avoid the inconvenience of employees seeking parking off-site. It has nothing, and then in parentheses it says, and to free up some spots on the street, which we've now decided are already free. So this is about them making it more convenient for their renters, and I just can't imagine how you could ever justify rezoning based on them making it more convenient for their renters that already have parking. That said, we're going to again push for some sort of resolution. This has been going on for years. We'd like to know when a decision is going to be made on this topic. Can you let us know anything more about that?
I'd like to say soon, I just want to make sure we're not missing anything. Since we've taken this long, it's to me, I just want to go over everything one more time. I don't want to, in the next couple of meetings, I'd say we'll have a vote one way or the other. Or it won't really be a vote, but it's a big decision if we're going to move forward or not.
Okay. And will a date when that decision will be made be provided to the?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Your name, please.
My name's Andrew Bergman. I live directly across the street from where the proposed parking lot is, and also where all the empty parking spaces currently are.
Who else? Hand in the back.
Hey, thank you, Kathy Hoffman here from Ecker Street. I just wanted to respond to one item that is new, which is I wanted to just point out that the application of planning norms for the appropriate number of vacancies doesn't really make sense in Irvington, and it often doesn't make sense in a lot of locales where they're applied. So I recall a previous process where we had a planner come in and discuss the requirement that we have. I think we were talking about building a pool down on Astor in the new Scenic Hudson Park at one point, and they said that with it, in the absence of 150 spot parking lot, we would not have the appropriate capacity to park for a pool that was imagined for that location. And obviously there's a continuum of what's appropriate, of what's required, and those planning objectives I think are understood to be ideals for new developments, but they don't really it doesn't make sense to, I think, apply them rigidly to a historic neighborhood. Thanks.
My name is Kay O'Keefe, and I live in the Half Moon Apartments, and I've lived there for 16 years. And it does trouble me that there will be more traffic on South Buckout Street. And I believe that the plan that they did is inaccurate because it only covered one day. I drive up and down all the time, and I see trucks loading and unloading at all times a day, including late afternoon. So in addition to the trucks unloading, we also have to consider the time that the school buses are coming through. So we have the school buses coming through, we have the trucks unloading, we have the congestion already at Main and South Buckout and Station Road and South Buckout. And this is only going to make it worse. Also, he talked about a 3-minute walk. Well, I've had to walk many more minutes than 3 minutes to get to where I work through most of my life. So the idea, and the Irvington Village residents walk to the train station. The idea of walking more than 3 minutes to me as being problematic is absurd. Also, we have always valued our green space in Irvington. I don't think that you should take our green space away. That's a buffer. It is a residential area, and I do not think we should have a parking lot there. Thank you.
Come on up, please.
I have the same question. We talk about residential versus commercial, but all I can tell you is this is a personal story. When our house burnt down on 87 South Buckout Street, and we were the insurance company was really putting a lot of pressure on us. If you don't build by this date, you will not be paid. And this is a whole house we're talking about. And we come to one of the meetings here. I don't know which committee it was. Maybe it wasn't zoning. It must have been the planning. And somebody raised an objection on this tiny lot that we have. It's a small house. And they said it doesn't aesthetically into the neighborhood, aesthetically fit. So we had to wait for another 2 weeks because they said it's too big. And the architect came back and measured the house. It was 3 inches taller than the surrounding buildings. I mean, that's the level of pressure we were put under by Irvington to maintain the character of Irvington. Now we're talking about putting up a parking lot and putting trees on top of the parking lot when we already have green space there. So, and there isn't that much green space on South Buckout. And I've always, as I go up and down like that lady on Half Moon, there are always spaces on South Buckout. So every time you try to make a left onto South Buckout from Main Street, you cannot. It's a single lane now. one car has to find an empty space so you can go past them and you have to back up. So we do not need more cars there. I mean, either that or get us little planes that fly on top of it. Then we will agree to the parking lot.
I'm Stephen Friend. I live on Maple Street also. Just for the record, and I said this at the last meeting, there really is no parking problem on Maple Street, and I live in the middle of Maple Street, which is one block over from this proposed lot. Maple Street would presumably be the worst of the side streets to be affected, but I see absolutely no parking problem on our street. The only other comment I'd like to make is, we spend, or at these meetings that I've been to, there's so much discussion of, well, does the business owner need more parking, as though that's the standard for changing a zoning designation in the village. And I'm sure, but I'm sure many of us have parking problems. That doesn't exclude us from the zoning provisions of the village. If you look at, for example, if you wanted to extend your sidewalk by 6 inches, and that exceeded the coverage ratio for your property, then under the village code, you would have to do 3 things. You would have to take into account the health, safety, and welfare of the village. That's number 1. You'd have to take into account the reasonable expectations of the neighboring property owners. That's number 2. And number 3, the applicant would need to demonstrate an extraordinary and unnecessary hardship. So those are the 3 things that you need to look at in the case where, again, your coverage ratio, you were going to exceed your coverage ratio, and you wanted to get around the zoning ordinance. In this case, if we were to look at those 3 factors, I mean, the health, safety, health and safety, I think a lot of my neighbors are here tonight because they don't think it's in our, they don't think a 45-car parking garage is in the health and safety interests of Spiro Park, with car alarms going off and headlights at night. The children, my children and the children of Spiro Park breathing in this additional car exhaust. We don't think it's within the reasonable expectations of the neighboring property owners, because when we bought our properties in Spiro Park, we assumed that residentially designated properties in the neighborhood would stay as such. And I don't believe, number 3, that the applicant has demonstrated an extraordinary and unnecessary hardship. The applicant has brought this scenario onto the applicant by acquiring residentially zoned real estate. And according to the traffic study, there are available spaces even at peak times during the week, because we're not talking about, we're not talking about 8 o'clock in the evening or 9 o'clock in the evening. We're talking about right in the middle of the afternoon. Even in the middle of the afternoon, there are available spaces. So if we look at the standards that the village has in its own code, I don't think they're met in this case, and I think the neighborhood of Spiro Park is, as you know, very against this parking lot. Thank you for your time.
Hi, Cheryl Brandwine, 85 South Buckhout Street. I'll tell you who's not surprised about the number of parking spaces available on South Buckhout Street, and that's my kids, because we count them every day on the way home from school at 2:30. And there's always at least 10 to 15 spaces available. So I know the traffic study was just one day, but I have 3 months worth of data. I have photographs that are all on the Facebook page, Safe South Buckhout Street. There's ample parking available on South Buckhout Street. It's hard to believe that 44 to 50 more cars will be good for the neighborhood. The planning board has recommended against this project. a comment about what Andrew mentioned about the comprehensive plan. The downtown working group, Bill Thompson of Astorbuck is on the downtown working group, so of course there's recommendations to explore opportunities for more parking. So I'm not sure if everyone was aware of that. I liked Connie's comment about the 17 spaces that are the math from the traffic consultant's report. I would again ask that we not raise 75 to 100 trees to maybe help Astorbuck find more convenient parking for its tenants when there's ample parking available. Thank you. I also would like to present a petition. I have copies for everyone. I can give it to Brenda, of over 250 residents that are against this project. And I ask you to please read the comments. Please read them. They took their time to write very thoughtful, very informed comments. And I hope that you will take everyone's opinion under consideration. We have an additional 7 signatures that were people who are not on computer-based petitions, so I'll leave that all with Brenda.
I just want to say
Just
something.
before you're done, I would like to respond to one thing you said. As the co-chair of the downtown working group, I take great exception to the notion that any one member influenced the recommendations. We sought very hard to include a wide, broad representation of people in the community, people who own businesses, people who patronize businesses, people who live here, people who commute here, and it was all volunteer people who put in time.
Understood. I just would like to bring out, because I was surprised as a resident of South Buckout Street who's been fighting this project for about 10 years, to see his name on the downtown working group, because it seemed maybe a conflict of interest to have someone who has a petition before the board.
It's not a conflict of interest to have various representatives of various groups within the village. That was the whole intention. We had the committees that I was familiar with. There were people with all sorts of mix of agendas, shall we say, but collectively the committees, I think, were pretty self-stabilizing. So I was going to say the same comment, that I just don't think that impugning one particular member or the committee itself that was working on the downtown group, or by inference the comprehensive plan process, I don't think that's called for.
Okay, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. I don't mean to impugn the process.
Well, you did.
What I'd like to do is just make
involved in the
information.
process. You could have been on that committee.
I
for
would
instance.
like to if I were not fighting this parking lot for the past 10 years.
So the other thing that I just want to make a point about is that I don't believe that someone else can say this, but I don't believe, unfortunately, that the characterization of your reading of the comprehensive plan vis-a-vis the parking situation downtown is really applicable to this particular project for several reasons. But more than that, I think the closest thing was to look at what we talked about in terms of the potential for parking development in a controlled manner at the DPW site if it ever goes into be sold into a mixed-use environment with parking because of the slope and everything. So that was definitely called out, but there was nothing in the comprehensive plan that called out a specific reference to what to do about Astorbuck and parking.
I didn't say it was.
No, but you were implying that somehow this could be piggybacked on the other kinds of issues, which are public parking to begin with, and it also had to do with, well, anyways, I just think people are really playing a little bit loose and fast right now.
Anyone else?
Hi. So I'm Ann Altman. I'm speaking as a resident of Spiral Park. This is Margaret. I can't park my car to save my life. I couldn't park in an empty football field. I'm a horrible driver. I hate my big car. I can't drive it. So when I take her to Stepping Stones, I park in the lot and walk. Like, that's just makes sense, you know? So, you'd think I would, the Irvington lot at the end. Which one? At the top of Main Street. Like, it's not too far, like the Aqueduct. Yeah, the Aqueduct. Yeah. So most people think that's nuts. They think, well, I just parallel park right out in front of, well, because I can't. So there's always empty spots, but I'm not going to chance it. So anyway, my point is that I haven't seen in my lifetime how a parking lot really improves the community, and that happens to be our community. And those trees have a lot of birds, and they provide oxygen, and it's really nice. And I don't know, it's 2018, and this building is right next to a train station, like right next to the train station. It's strange that we're building parking lots for employees that work at a building right next to the train station. That's all. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Anybody else? Please.
Hi, my name's Ross Vincent. I'm first-time visitor here, but I live on South Buckout Street. I've seen the videos that you've posted online. I think it's great that there's transparency in this process. I really like that. I didn't catch your name, I'm sorry.
John.
John. So one of the things that you said was that cars come and go and they leave during the day, but you only count them once, and there are often open spots when people leave. Is that right?
Well, when a car leaves, the spot is open.
Yeah, but you didn't count the fact that somebody else would park there and...
Well, but... Just so that...
Yeah, sure, sure.
So when we do our survey and we go through, we pass down the street and we count the number of cars, and if there's an empty space, we keep going and we note it as an empty space, and then that's it. And if we come back later during the day and there's a car there, we count it later in the day. But
Okay, but if a car parks there and then it leaves,
yes,
that spot is open.
correct, when it leaves.
And there's no technology in place to inform anybody else that's going to park there that they can park there.
So there is technology, but it's not in this village.
So perhaps we could employ that, because it seems like a statistical oversight, that you would count that the spot's been taken, but then the person leaves, and then the spot becomes available.
I understand what you're saying. Thank
Right?
you.
So, like in the city, I park in the city all the time.
Yep.
And there's often signs saying car park full.
Yep.
But if the light's not on, there are spots in the car park. Could we not employ something like that in this instance, so that when someone leaves, somebody else can take the space?
Sure.
Okay. And then, as a resident of Half Moon, I don't have I park on the street, often not in front of my house. And the way that I get around that is I walk. Why is that not why can't someone just park? Often I've had to park at the end of my street over the distances that you guys are talking about here to get to work. I have to walk further to get to my house. It's not a problem. That's all I have to say.
Hi, I'm David Brenwine, and I live adjacent to the property that's being looked at. Firstly, for the record, I don't find that I'd like this issue addressed in the comprehensive plan, because I really don't see how this benefits the residents in any way. So if that could be amended, that I don't know if this language is permanent or how you're going to word this going forward in the future, but I don't see this being in the residents' interests at all, certainly in my area. Now, as far as commercial entities go in the comprehensive plan, I'm sure there's lots of commercial entities in Irvington that would love a parking lot in front of their businesses, but so I don't know why this particular instance would get special treatment. And in defense of Cheryl, my wife, this has been a very emotional issue for us. We bought a property in a residential area. And by the way, for the record, when we bought the house, this isn't the first home I've owned. I looked at the property. I was a little scared by it, to tell you the truth. But I looked at it and said, it's a residential zoned area. That's a residential property. Don't worry, honey. We can buy this house because it's in a residential area. It's not a commercial area. Don't worry. Nobody's going to build a McDonald's across the street. That's what I said. That's what I thought to myself. I would not have bought the property had I known this was going to happen. That's the honest truth. We're getting tired of this. It's an emotional strain on us. We have to pay for babysitters every time this happens. It's been going on for 8 years, and we're getting really sick and tired of it. So forgive my wife being upset, but we feel it's a little conspiratorial at this point. Maybe it's our paranoia, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I really don't know how you honestly feel about this. The last meeting, the mayor scolded me and said, and this is the truth, Brian, that I have nothing against anybody on. I have no interest other than getting rid of this project. But we're getting very tired of this. Really, it's enough. So thank you.
I will say one thing, that this is really, we have to let the process play out, and I appreciate
8 years.
I appreciate Russ saying he was happy this was an open process, because that's the way it works. So we respond to it. If they come back in 2 years with another application on something else, we have to respond to it. If you come back and you want to rezone, you could come back every month with the potential rezoning. Like, I don't understand. When we think that there might be some value here, so we pursued it. So that's the way the process has to play out. This was the first time we've had hard numbers, so it changes some things.
It seems like it's a solution for a problem that doesn't exist.
Well, we didn't know that, because we had other people writing us letters, and we had people complaining to us that they were parking on Maple Street and Willow Street from Astorbuck. So then we were trying to respond to those people that were complaining about that at the time. And even, so we had someone that said, yes, it's still an issue, I don't know, 6 months ago or so. So, I think that's why we asked for the study, and we just got the study. We don't really control the timing of it, because, as you know, they put it on hold a few times, they changed it, they came back. We don't have control over that, and we don't want to just say no out of hand that, oh, you can't move them back too many times. If there was a redesign that the neighborhood liked, that'd be great. And I kept hoping that we'd get to that, because I think typically there's compromise. I could envision a great plan that maybe was a third the size, but it's always going to be beautiful, much improved park plan there or something like that. That was my original view for this. And to me, if I lived across the street from it, and someone said, hey, I'm going to build a 25 spot parking lot that's going to be below grade, and then you're going to have, however much the rest of that is, 2/3 of it is going to be forever wild, and we'll declare a park plan. That would have been I would have liked that living across the street. We haven't gotten there, so that's why I haven't given up. I was hoping something happened like that. I hope the applicant had reached out to you guys, had reached out to, South Buck out to Half Moon North, Half Moon South, Sparrow Park. Think what a difference this would be if we had a petition from Half Moon North and South that said, this is a wonderful proposal. We haven't gotten that yet, but that was a possibility. So we wanted to hear this out, and trust me, it's now 9 o'clock. We have another 2 hours on our agenda tonight. We don't enjoy this. Again, I see Kevin Gallagher sitting in the back. I've known Kevin for over 20 years in the fire department. We've had sidebar conversations about this. I believe every word he says. People, the conspiracy stuff, I got to tell you, it really hurts my feelings. And you told me you're assuming there's a lot of things. Maybe you and I should go have a beer sometime. But I honestly, like someone like Kevin telling me he's upset about this, take 100%. Mr. Ranganathan and Mrs. Ranganathan, I grew up with their son. I was in that house that burned down. I was in the house that burned down with Kevin when it was on fire, but I was also in their house playing board games. I don't want to impact them.
Brian, I'm not accusing anyone of participating in a conspiracy. I'm being no.
You said maybe, maybe not.
Listen. The fact of the matter is that we don't feel heard. That we haven't had the plans tonight that were drawn up weren't shared with us in advance. It would have been nice if they were. The gentleman put together. We didn't get them. I didn't see them until tonight.
Online, we actually gave your
wife. So I apologize.
So I mean,
Did we have these plans for the evening? For these?
Was it on the agenda?
It's on the agenda. You said it's going to be on the agenda.
No, it was on the agenda. We didn't see the actual report, though, so we couldn't prepare.
It was with the backup of the agenda.
Okay, so maybe
we specifically reached out to your wife specifically and said, we want to let you know this is on the agenda.
Brian, I'm not saying there's a conspiracy. I'm saying that we're emotional because we feel a tremendous amount of strain from this issue. That we're constantly checking the website to see if this issue is going to rear its ugly head again. And again, we live in a residential zone. We'd like to continue to live in a residential zone. So the fact that we don't feel heard should be a concern of yours. I hope it is, and a concern of the rest of the community. And the residents of our area are just as upset about it as we are.
And you don't feel heard?
Do I feel hurt?
Yeah.
Hurt? No, I really don't. I think that that there are plenty of other businesses in Irvington that would love more parking
in their area.
And if they have land to potentially do it, they could petition us if they want to.
But I
we
don't
would
see
get
the
a
need
copy
for
on
this
it.
particular entity to have more
That's what
parking
we're
than it
trying to
does.
determine.
Okay,
That's
good.
taking us
You know,
this long.
but this has been going on for 8 years.
I understand that, but it hasn't been going on
8 years of
straight.
babysitters. Come on, give us a break. Enough. Please put a cap on this. Enough of it.
Someone wrote in the petition that perhaps we can consider a limit to the number of times someone can petition on the same matter over and over, because it's wasting your time, it's wasting their time, it's wasting our time. So just something to consider in the future. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just a quick comment, Pat Nettarelli at 29 Maple Street, and just to clear something up for my new neighbor Steve, there was a problem on Maple Street about 4 years ago with parking from Astorbuck, and it was a petition that the residents of Maple Street got together, and we were able to get some changes made, and I have to say that the parking situation is a lot better on Maple Street than it was 4 years ago. We don't have the constant parking on there from Astorbuck. Now you get the people who go to the yoga zone and come up there and park for an hour and then they're gone. But we used to have cars completely up and down Maple Street. So I just want to clear that up.
Thank you. Since everybody knows who I am already.
I feel compelled to say something. I am vehemently opposed to this parking lot, and I will be until it gets resolved. But the village can add 2 spots overnight on the little circle right next to my house. About, 3-4 years ago, the police department decided to paint yellow zebra stripes, and we lost 2 parking spaces. Just because I think somebody else complained they don't want people parking in front of their house. A can of black paint, get rid of those spots, and you get 2 more spots on South Park Avenue. Less than 3 minutes away from the building.
Anyone else? Please, Mr. Ranganathan.
My name is V.K. Ranganathan. I live on 87 South Buckout Street. At the outset, I thank Mayor Brian Smith and the members of the committee for taking the time to listen to our issues as well as the problems of Astorbuck. Today's presentation, unfortunately, did not convince me that there's a parking problem for the Astorbuck property. But I was happy to hear the mayor telling that we'll soon decide on this issue and not prolong it for a long time. Having said that, I would like to add, if it is found necessary that there is a parking problem and it has to be addressed, and I would request the village as well as the Astorbuck property owners to look at other options. There are other options available, namely the area now dedicated to Public Works Department that can really be considered to reconstructed in such a manner that it would allow for more than 50 parking spaces. It's possible, and we need to explore other avenues. I appreciate some considerations given to that. And also a last point, if we agree to this change of rules in this case, I'm very concerned that in less than a few years, Astorbuck will be coming to the village for expansion of its activities further, asking for other properties which can easily be acquired, and they could be extending the, if you make this a precedent, this could go on forever for the rest of the Buckout Street. And Astorbuck is a growth agency. Its balance sheet has grown substantially. I wish them well, but their parking issues could be addressed in a different way, but looking at other options. Thank you very much.
Anybody else?
Leola Speck, North Cotsonet Street.
And, I feel a little bad for the property owner. I happen to be in the camp of thinking that I don't think we need a big parking lot like that, but there has to be some productive use of that property that would benefit the well-being of the residents and the community in a way that it currently does. I mean, there's cooling effect of the trees, the green space. I like the thinking, Mark, of trying to think differently about how we could satisfy the requirements of everyone, help meet some business needs, help meet the needs of the community. We also have to think about things like runoff, impervious surfaces, even with drains that go out. All the water here runs into our river, and a parking lot has oils and different things. Right now, the trees and the green space is sequestering, all of that sort of runoff. It has a cooling effect. There's a lot of pavement, a lot of buildings around there. So really important, I think, for any consideration of any changing of zoning, that we keep these things in mind as well. I truly hope there's a good use for that property that benefits everybody, and I just encourage more innovative thinking what's going to take, be better for the well-being of our businesses and our residents.
Anybody else?
Lisa again, 61 Helen Road. So I don't live in the area, and I haven't said anything because of that, but I do have the perspective of somebody who drives into that area, maybe more similarly situated to the tenants, and I can just confirm what it sounds like this whole room already knows, that I always see open spaces along Station Road, which I drive along because it's just so beautiful that I choose to drive on there. And I see them around me, and I see them on Buckout Street as I approach the library, or I'm on my way to Matheson Park, and I see it at all times of the day. I sometimes do take them when I go to take the train to the city because I don't have a permit. I've never had any trouble seeing a space there. So that's one thing. And the other thing I wanted to say is just, I want to just say a word about responsiveness. That's one of the things that draws people to a community like this, is the ability to stand and look in the eyes of people who represent you and to feel that they're responsive. I was amazed just a few days ago to be at a wonderful community event, Cake for Change, where our county executive and a new state senator tasted cakes, and we heard from them about what they want to accomplish and what they already have done in response to our demands. So I think you've heard, sounds like from some people for many years, from even more people for a couple of years, from even more people tonight, about what the people of the village want, and the people of the village are your constituents. So I hope you will be responsive to all of our voices. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. So the long-awaited stormwater report. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
They got it right for real.
It's vanilla. You knew we'd find vanilla. Yes, now I'm okay. I'm following engineers. But the rest of us will give them our cards. Don't see that.
Yes. Yeah, really good. Good.
I see a lot of you on Facebook.
I'm spending a little bit of work, but definitely more fun than work these days.
Kids are up.
Congratulations.
No, yes, that is.
Where's she?
Yes, DC.
Easier parking. Actually, more easier to drive. Because they know
All right.
destination.
Congratulations. I believe in the mission built today for a world
Two places.
One piece you don't.
It is open, right? You try to do this, so if you go to the
No banner, exactly.
In the process of collecting.
Usually, we need at least 6 hours. Oh, what do you mean, 5 p.m.? Oh, what do you mean?
Handful of households that are.
Yeah, right.
To
Yeah.
leave at 12 until you get to where you're going to.
And in addition to that, there's a lot
No,
of
it's, I've played that game a lot, and it doesn't work.
grandparents visiting,
I always try to push things up.
for college visiting, or any overnight residence. It's becoming so.
You gotta look until,
From my house,
you're right, that's
house,
it.
300 nights, and I started tickets without incidents. That's the issue that we're working on.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
All right, no problem.
I spoke with you about the same issue, right?
But to me, what they were missing, and I feel.
Okay, next.
Unfortunately, this isn't the end. There's still more.
Guys, for all you do.
Take care. Stormwater report, Larry. Should be under 2 hours, right?
I was just trying to come up with my line about clearing a room, but we can all figure that out.
This is the most we've ever had with stormwater.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure it will flow fast, we can rush through it.
yes.
Spoiler alert, the water's okay.
Rapid.
Okay, so as you know, the village is an operator of a stormwater collection system. The water that's collected is technically discharged into the waters of the United States, which in this case is the Hudson River. So as a result, we're under a federal permit that is administered through the state of New York, and that comes along with it a variety of reporting requirements. The stormwater report, of which there's a copy in the back and has been on the website as well, is not the easiest report to read. It's broken down into multiple categories, which I'll very briefly outline. But basically, there's a public education outreach component where we document the various mailings that we do to people, which in this case is the sanitation calendar. There's information about stormwater collection on there. There's our email list, which has over 1,200 people on the list. We also have outreach through Facebook and Twitter and other means like that. And so information about stormwater is disseminated in that way. We also have public participation projects that contribute to cleaner stormwater, like the cleanup of our trails, and there's been in the past Eagle Scout projects that have addressed water quality in some respect. Another component that's integral to stormwater management and documenting of that is the village's observations of any illicit discharges. So there are places where you don't expect to see water flowing. If it hasn't rained, for example, there's places where when it does rain, water flows and it'll flow into a stream. And when there's a period of dry times, you expect to see dry. And if it's not dry, that's a indication that there could be something that's contaminated flowing. So we have those locations mapped, and we screen them regularly throughout the year, and we report any illicit discharges. Of course, we track those down very quickly if there are any, which there weren't in this year, in this past year. But if there were, we would track them down and eliminate them, of course. We also, there are also procedures related to stormwater runoff for construction sites. The report is limited to construction sites that are disturbing 1 acre or more. That doesn't mean that we don't look at the ones that are disturbing 1 acre or less. We just don't report on it as part of this annual report. And in the past year, there was actually one project that is disturbing more than 1 acre, and that's the the Marker Ridge, Donardo Townhomes along South Broadway. So that site is being observed like any other construction site, but it's being reported on as part of this annual report. And then there are other sections that relate to what are called stormwater best practices, so retention basins and other such facilities that help retain stormwater. And although we don't have a regular inspection program and the stormwater regulations don't require that yet, we do know where they are, and when and if some of those are inspected. They're privately owned, not village owned, but if they are inspected, we do document that as part of this report. And if they're not functioning properly, we take steps with the property owner to make sure they do function properly. And then there's a last section on stormwater management for municipal operations. So we document the number of times we clean our catch basins with our vacuum truck. We document the number of times we sweep our parking lots to keep the parking lots clean so that doesn't enter into the catch basin system. And all of that is in this report if you dig deep enough. This report is as of, I believe, early March, for the year ended early March, and needs to be filed with the state of New York by the end of May. So any comments that we get from the large crowd that we have tonight, or anyone on the board, we would document and address that in our report to the state, should there be any questions. That's it.
We used to spend an hour on that. The guy who prepared it. Remember, we used to go through every page.
I like this version.
Yes, it's much better.
I'm just through page by page.
Yeah, exactly. So what about page 2?
Do we have anything that the village is failing at or falling short of requirements?
No. We do work with a consultant to make sure that we're kept in line with the latest provisions of the permit that we operate under. Some of those provisions change from time to time, so they keep us in line, and everything seems in order. We've also been subject to an audit. The state DEC periodically audits agencies to make sure that we're compliant. We haven't had one recently and probably are due for one. But the last one we had several years ago, we had very few issues. It was all paperwork, really.
I do hope that we can get some more public education about the whole flow from rain to river, going again through the GPTF, because I think that's a lot of information that could be useful for people to see, where they could help maintain the quality of the water that's flowing into the river.
Right. And if and when that happens, we'll be sure to document it, which is what the state's looking for.
Come on,
please.
Clinton Radisby from 12 South Ferris. Do you have a sense for how much it costs to comply?
I do. The consultant cost alone is about $2,500 for the preparation of the report and the keeping us in compliance, and that doesn't count the staff time, which there's probably several dozen hours just dealing with the compliance reporting part of it amongst all of our staff members, which also doesn't count the time that the staff is actually out there cleaning the catch basins and all the things that
I
need to be
guess
done.
that was my question, was the actual cost of compliance.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a $2,500 out of pocket, and then there's a bunch of sunk staff time.
It's just sort of in the normal budget of the...
It's part of the operating budget, yeah. But
it's part of the-
not insignificant, though.
Yeah, exactly. We never broke down the actual hours, but
No, but
it's not a rounding error. I don't think.
No, it isn't.
The $2,500 is the actual person that puts together all of it, but the time spent, even like looking for discharges and things like that, it's a lot.
Well, and cleaning out the catch basins, you have a $275,000 vacuum truck that's used for that purpose. That you buy once every 10 years, but it's not a small number.
If you don't do that, then you end up with flooded streets and other kinds of property damage. So it's kind of a value proposition. Where
you get value out of it in some of it. Some of the compliance stuff is not so much. It's the reporting is very tedious.
Any other questions? That's fantastic. Interactive stormwater.
That's the first question we
Yeah.
That's not true.
It's probably a spot you can put on the floor.
Thank you.
We don't have to vote to accept it or anything like that?
No. Just if there's any questions between now and, as we get to the end of the month, yeah, just let me know.
Award of contract 2018-05 for the use and operation of heavy equipment. Never-ending saga on this one.
Yeah, no, it's not too much of a saga. That we did, for the village's use of heavy equipment, like excavation equipment, and other heavy equipment that's used in our construction projects, we did do a bid. The bid, we received two valid bids. One of them was a little short. There was a couple of pieces of equipment that they didn't have, but it wasn't something that would have necessarily knocked them out. The low bidder decided after some back and forth, which is the saga I guess you're talking about.
Yeah, it's not a real saga.
Yeah, but the delay was as a result of this. So he had a little bit of a reconsideration on the commitment level that we were requiring. I don't know how obvious it was from the documents, but there's a significant amount of work that's needed and work that's expected, and I decided that he wasn't able to take that on at this time. So he did formally withdraw his bid, which left us with one bidder, which is the contractor that we've used for many years, so there's really no issues there. The prices are in line with what we've had in the past.
And this is in lieu of renting the equipment effectively, or having to...
It is a rental, but it's with an operator. So it is a rental, essentially.
And is it, so we just aggregated, we think we're going to need, I don't know, like 20 hours of a bulldozer or something, whatever it is.
Yeah, we come up with the estimated quantities, they put in the unit prices, we extend it out, and that's the dollars that you're voting on here. But in any given year, it could be higher or lower than those particular numbers, but you need a place to compare, so those are the numbers you see there.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing from looking at the actual bids is like, one of them might be cheaper on this piece of equipment, it's all over the place.
Yeah, no, we can't. This is not a contract where you bid one.
Yeah, you can't have a contract and a actual contract.
Yeah.
Now, do they have to respond within a certain length of time for a particular job, you know what I'm saying? Or is it like a...
There's a minimum time that we provide the contractor to schedule a job. So it's not, and there is no emergency provision, but again, our experience with this particular contractor is certainly not an issue in terms of emergencies. So we have
emergencies
meeting a water main break.
Water main break. And I was thinking what about a larger regional emergency? Right.
Yeah, I mean,
are up at that point.
Right, every man for himself.
Right. You should have owned it.
Right.
Okay.
Whereas two bids were received for contract 2018-05 for the use and operation of heavy equipment as follows: Pat Paving Inc., not all items bid, total bid $90,045. Tom Bucci Excavating Complete, $123,400. Whereas the bid from Pat Paving Inc. was withdrawn on April 20th, 2018. Whereas the village administrator has determined that the proposal from Tom Bucci Excavating is in order and responsive to the specifications. Now therefore be it resolved to award contract 2018-05 for the use and operation of heavy equipment to the amount of $123,400 to Tom Bucci Excavating, and to authorize the village administrator to execute said contract. I'll make the motion. Can I have a second? Second. All in favor? Want to do stormwater again?
Start again.
Additional services under contract 2017. I'm sorry. Acceptance of final generic environmental impact statement related to the 2018 comprehensive plan update. I'm not sure how to skip that one.
Okay.
Everyone was waiting for it.
So yeah, Marion can just quickly take us through where we've been and where we are. Yeah.
Right. The board on March 28th had a public hearing on the comprehensive plan update and the draft generic environmental impact statement. It's accepted written comments until April 11th. Now, all those comments were responded to in the FGEIS. It was essentially what we said before, plus the answers to the questions. But in addition, the board made several changes to the draft comprehensive plan update based on comments that it got from either the public or the county. And there were 5 changes, 5 significant changes. One is originally the recommendation for the rezoning on Broadway was that medical uses not be allowed at all, and it was amended to say that, it was changed so that medical offices or facilities might be allowed by special permit, but only for medical uses that wouldn't negatively impact the area traffic. Second change was in response to a comment by the Westchester County Planning Board, and that was a recommendation that sidewalks be required in any commercial and multifamily developments on the large properties on the east side of Broadway. Third was that one recommendation of the comprehensive plan update was that short-term rentals like Airbnb and VRBO be permitted with, a lot of restrictions. But one recommendation was to add a limit, and a limit be set on the number of rental days and or the number of potential guests in any one of these things. So that was added to the CPU recommendation. It eliminated the reference to the North Ferris Street lot, which actually even came up at this meeting today. Several people commented on it, so that's been eliminated. And then the most commented on recommendation was permitting special events in historically and architecturally significant properties, and that was deleted altogether. Otherwise, it's pretty much the document everybody saw. And there will be, when is it on, Larry?
The 21st.
May 21st will be out for a final vote. There can be more comments until then, both on the draft generic environmental impact statement and the comprehensive plan update.
Marion, did we actually have something that, I can't remember now, did we have a draft version of something that amounted to an EIS in terms of impacts of the proposals?
No,
You don't have it in this?
point. A generic environmental impact statement just looks at the whole thing and says, it can do different things, but this one in particular says that we'll evaluate the impacts when a particular recommendation comes up. So that if you rezone it to allow beekeeping, you'll have to do which is one of the recommendations.
It's because it's too broad of a topic area to be able to...
Yeah, it's conceivable you could do it on every recommendation, but the problem, it's true, it probably wouldn't be that meaningful because it's like so many different things. So this way, as each change comes up, you'll have to do, for the most part, you'll have to do an environmental analysis of each recommendation, each zoning recommendation, each one that requires secret.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? My reading time again?
I'm not sure I understand, for example, the last one, does that mean there are no weddings allowed and no major parties? I'm not sure how that read. It's deleted, meaning it can't be done.
The recommendation was that in these historically or architecturally significant houses, that large events maybe be allowed by special permit. That was stricken altogether, so the recommendation's gone altogether.
And I'm concerned about the Airbnb thing because without knowing what you're setting it for.
Well, right now, you should understand, this is just a recommendation that you consider zoning to allow Airbnbs. Once the comprehensive plan update is adopted, let's say it's adopted with it, that doesn't mean people can start opening Airbnbs. There would have to be a zoning change to permit it. And there'll be a public hearing and so if there's a zoning change to permit Airbnb, there'll be a draft of the law circulated, there'll be a public hearing on it. My guess is the public hearing will go on for 4 meetings.
At least 8 years. The only corruption is I work with all the babysitters in the area. That's my end game. I get a nickel of every $3 they make.
And now the truth comes
At the last
out.
meeting, it said they would only allow it on Main Street, not in
No.
all neighborhoods.
That was, the recommendation was that bed and breakfasts be allowed.
Traditional ones.
Traditional bed and
Kind of
breakfast,
Oh,
right?
you're kidding.
Bed and breakfast like inns.
So they're willing to allow that throughout our community? That means on our street where my kids, where the neighbors'
Well,
kids who are
Only on Main Street.
8, 9, 10 can walk down the street, will not feel safe because
We're not
someone's
deciding
renting to a
specifics
stranger.
now. We're not deciding specifics now. We're just accepting a generic statement of the recommendations that have been discussed for months and months. Nothing is being enacted into law tonight or a final decision made.
No, this May 21st.
No, not then either.
No, that's just a recommendation, and then the board's gonna have to consider it. And just because it's in the comprehensive plan doesn't mean the board will finally adopt something, they're generally sympathetic, they want it, but it may be when you get down to the, the small prints, you can't agree on things, but it's a recommendation and that's the context for you to consider.
I think we should move on. Reading time.
Whereas the Board of Trustees, acting as lead agency under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, held a public hearing on the draft generic environmental impact statement and the 2018 comprehensive plan on March 28, 2018, in which all members of the public were invited to be heard. And whereas the village board provided for a written comment period until April 11, 2018, whereas the Board of Trustees received and reviewed the final generic environmental impact statement related to the 2018 comprehensive plan, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees, as lead agency for proposed comprehensive plan update, finds the FGEIS to be accurate and adequate for purposes of public consideration, and further resolve that a copy of the accepted FGEIS will be placed on the Village of Irvington website for public review, and a copy of the FGEIS will be placed on file with the village clerk, and a written comment period established until May 21st, 2018. I'll make a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Additional services under contract 2017-05 with Ferguson Malone Architecture for the feasibility study of the Town Hall Theater entrance.
Okay, so the Board of Trustees had previously authorized a contract with Ferguson Malone to study making the feasibility of making revisions to the entrance to the Town Hall Theater, currently on the west side of the building. In the course of that study, there was an idea and a consideration that there may be some merit to entering the theater from the east side of the building, towards where the school is. And those concepts were presented to the board, just again, very conceptual, and there was some acceptance of the idea. It seems like it makes a lot of sense. The school district also saw some value in that. Not that anyone signed off, but they certainly are accepting of the idea. So with that, there are some additional engineering architectural fees involved in making that change of focus, and also to prepare a schematic plan suitable for fundraising, grant applications, of which there are a few possibilities there. So the services specifically, that the board budgeted $60,000 for the original study. The study was actually engaged at $55,000, so $5,000 under budget. The additional fees that are needed under the existing contract are $20,000, which leaves a $15,000 shortfall, and that's the way the recommendation and the resolution is structured.
It was pretty straightforward. Any questions? Hope we get a great concept. Whereas the Board of Trustees previously approved contract 2017-05 for the professional services related to the feasibility study of the Town Hall Theater entrance, whereas additional services are needed for further study an alternate entrance into the Town Hall Theater, now therefore be it resolved to authorize additional services in the amount not to exceed $20,000, bringing the total of fees to $75,000 under contract 2017-05 with Ferguson Malone Architecture related to the feasibility study of the Town Hall Theater entrance, and further resolved to authorize the following budget transfers. General fund surplus plus $15,000, transfer to capital projects fund plus $15,000, theater renovation project plus $15,000, transfer from general fund plus $15,000. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Next is authorization to pay the Irvington Education Foundation for the Main Street School Community Playground Project.
So this resolution is to validate a pledge done by the Farmers Market Committee towards the construction of the Main Street School Community Playground. The Farmers Market, as you know, generates and fully supports its operations. It is a village operation run by under the direction of volunteers that you've appointed, but generates funds for the operations and in fact excess funds, to which they felt there was a connection to this community playground given its proximity to where the market is held on a weekly basis. So $10,000 is what was pledged. We wanted to document it here in the minutes so that the treasurer can make that payment under your direction.
Larry, how much is the balance in their fund?
It's higher than what I originally reported. I think in the last year, they're running a positive balance of 15,000, but they have a couple of years of accumulated amounts, which I think are over $50,000.
I wonder if they might consider helping to fund the recycling that they're asking us to help involve. Just as a public.
Yeah, we'll figure out the costs and maybe we make a proposal.
Okay.
Get a 5-person petition.
I see every month the ledger that as liaison, a copy is sent to me, so Brenda's office produces that. You know, it's certainly done financially well compared to the very shaky early first days, years of it, and it's, I think, a testament to a lot of good committee work and a good project. I certainly see this as connected to it.
I really like Larry's idea. I think that's a real nice starter point. But the only thing I've said, and I said it to the board, in terms of through email, is that I was just surprised. I would like to have presentation about this before the actual commitment was made, so we could at least have, I mean, in this particular case, maybe it's a no-brainer, but in other cases, it may not be so much of a no-brainer, so I think we should just be sure that the various committees that do have operational funds that they are allocating, if they have these ideas, come to us first to talk about it before they sign the line.
Yeah, that whole sequence has been cleared up.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
No bad intention, that's for sure. And
No, everything's been clarified, so that's...
Anyway, good. Proceed.
Whereas the Village of Irvington and its Farmers Market Committee wish to support the construction of the state-of-the-art, dynamic, and inclusive playground at the Main Street School, and whereas the Irvington Education Foundation is the organization designated to collect funds for the community playground project, now therefore be it resolved to authorize the clerk treasurer to pay the Irvington Education Foundation the amount of $10,000 to support the community playground project from funds previously generated by the operations of the Irvington Farmers Market. With the motion, I have a second. Aye. And approval of a filming permit for Brand Cinemas.
Well, it's a quick turnaround on this. The filming is actually, it's a commercial, and it's at 2 Clifton Place. The filming is scheduled for tomorrow and Wednesday, and it is during the normal hours of filming that are listed in our code, and the fee for the permit is $2,000. It's filming on private property only.
And they don't need police presence or
no police presence. No, the property accommodates everything that they need.
And have neighbors been noticed, or do neighbors need to be noticed?
I didn't think it was necessary in this instance, given the fact that it's during the time window. Yeah, exactly.
It's only an ad for AR-15s.
So, what's the name?
For the record,
it's not. No, I don't know what the ad's for, but it does have a actor.
No guns and no explosions on site.
No.
Yeah.
Correct.
Any questions? Resolved to approve a filming permit for Brand Cinema for the filming at 2 Clifton Place, Irvington, New York, on May 8th and 9th, 2018, from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. with a fee of $2,000. I'll make the motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
No one wants to.
No, all of us are in Croatia. Reports of board, standing committees, and officers. Brief trustee liaison reports. Mark?
Brief.
I'm done.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark.
Right.
Setting a high bar. You should get the fire department's email to us shortly. Just
Nothing tonight.
Doc.
Just quickly, the next meeting of the Recreation and Parks Advisory Committee is Wednesday, May 23rd at the Senior Center. The Woods Committee will meet on Tuesday, the 15th at the Nature Center. The CAB meets tomorrow at the Senior. And our congratulations to our own Angela Thornton, her husband Kyle, and Sister Bailey, who welcomed rider Peter Thornton to the world on Thursday, May 3rd. Mom and baby went home today, and all is well.
Excellent.
Okay, so the Sunday farmers markets outdoors start June 3rd. And they go from, that market goes from 9 to 1:30. And that's my report.
I do have the fire department. It just came. The Irving Fire Department responded to 28 calls in the month of April. Significant calls. There was a structure fire. There's one on 6 Meadow Way. Irving Fire Department was dispatched at 9:21 to residential alarm 6 Meadow Way. Chief of Drama noticed smoke in the structure, immediately upgraded alarms. Help from Tarrytown, Dobson, and Ardsley. The fire was quickly brought under control with minimal damage. Great job done by the IFD and surrounding towns. There were 5 motor vehicle accidents, which a car into a building. The fire department was dispatched at 3:16 to motor vehicle accident on Riverview Road. Upon arrival, the victim had been extricated by members of the police department. Con Ed Electric was called due to damage to electrical service. The residence, once he was deemed safe, was turned over to the building department. Training on April 17th, the Irving Fire Department worked on their skills with using ground ladders. It's our first outside training of the year and a good refresher of our skills. Newer replaced equipment, 2 new AEDs, automated external defibrillators, put into service on engine 177 and rescue 49. They replaced 2 outdated units that were near their expiration date. That's it for the fire department.
And the highway department and water departments have been very busy doing wonderful things, including the cleaning of the catch basins, as always.
Awesome. Way to tie it all together. Village Administrator's report.
Nothing, I just have 2 matters in executive session.
Village Clerk Treasurer's report. Village Attorney's report. We call that the Grand Slam right there. Public comment. You guys stuck around all this time, you have anything to say?
Practicing. It took me attending 10,000 meetings in my lifetime to
finally
sit through
speak?
one and not speak.
Oh. All right, review of action items.
I didn't put anything down that I starred.
I make a motion to
Sure,
adjourn
lots
to
to do,
executive
but-
session regarding an employee discipline matter and a PPA grievance arbitration. Can I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.